We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Thousands march again in a huge Hong Kong anti-government rally. Firefighters battle wildfires in central Portugal. Protesters in Seoul slam Japan's aid at a demonstration against trade restrictions. A battle for change is far from over for women in New Sudan. Iran leads the resistance against U.S. unilateralism. The U.S. endures extreme heat as temperatures soar. President Trump says, "We will work with the UK over Iran's seizure of British oil tanker." Plus, Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo attended a conference on religious freedom. Hello everyone, I am Eliza Gonzalez Manglikmont, bringing you stories from around the globe, and this is Eagle News, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. Another huge anti-government march kicked off in Hong Kong with seemingly no end in sight to the turmoil engulfing the finance hub, sparked by years of rising anger over Beijing's rule. The focus of the march lies in protesters' demand for an independent inquiry into police tactics.
首先要撤回先咯，撤回法案先啦，咁之後就成立呢個獨立調查委員會咯，係啊，最起碼呢樣嘢做咗先咯。 其實暴力我哋要睇翻佢個背後嗰個根源係咩嘛？佢點解要啲年青人哋要咁暴力啊？要睇翻成件事咯，所以咪要去查咯，係啊。係㗎啦，你自己人查自己人，點可以還佢清白出嚟咧？所以而家你最大嘅嚟出嚟好多都係要啲委員。
The city has been plunged into its worst crisis in recent history by weeks of marches and sporadic violent confrontations between police and pockets of hardcore protesters. The initial protests were lit by a now-suspended bill that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China. But they have since evolved into a wider movement calling for democratic reforms, universal suffrage, and a halt to sliding freedoms in the semi-autonomous territory. Police have fired tear gas and rubber bullets, while the parliament has been trashed by protesters as Beijing's authority faces its most serious challenge since Hong Kong was handed back to China in 1997. Sunday's rally is the 7th weekend in a row that residents have come out en masse. More than 1,000 firefighters battled early Sunday to control huge wildfires that have forced village evacuations in central Portugal, where dozens were killed in huge blazes in 2017. According to the website of the Civil Protection, by the early hours of Sunday morning, more than 1,000 firefighters and 400 vehicles had been deployed to fight the blazes in the mountainous and heavily forested Castelo Branco region, 200 kilometers north of Lisbon. Efforts to douse the flames using around 20 aeroplanes and helicopters had been halted as night fell. Luis Belo Costa, the commander of the Civil Protection for the region, said a civilian who suffered serious injuries was evacuated by helicopter to Lisbon. 4 firefighters were also reported injured, and a further 3 were hurt after their fire engine collided with another. The army said in a statement it was dispatching 20 soldiers and machinery to open routes to facilitate access for the firefighters. The Civil Protection said several national highways have been closed and a number of villages in the region have been evacuated as a precaution. According to Belo Costa, the most threatening of the 3 fires was 90% under control. People in Seoul gathered for a protest in front of the Embassy of Japan in South Korea, denouncing Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and recent export restrictions.
오늘날 한일 정권은 바로 자신이 역사에서 저지른 범죄를 인정하지 않고 있습니다. 끝까지 범죄를 인정하고 있지 않습니다. 그리고는 그것을 국제법으로 우기고 있습니다.
정치는 표를 먹고 산다지만 누구의 표를 먹고 사는지, 일본의 국회인지 국회의원인지 일본의 표를 먹고 살겠다는 것인지, 일본 앞에 구걸하라 파이어라고 하는 자들을 우리가 용서할 수 있겠습니까?
President Donald Trump said Friday he remained at the ready to help South Korea and Japan solve their lingering dispute over World War II era forced labor that has blighted their trade ties. After South Korea's high court ordered Japanese firms that used forced labor to compensate victims, Tokyo in early July restricted exports of chemicals vital to Seoul's world-leading chip and smartphone industry in an escalation of their decades-old row. South Korean President Moon Jae-in has said Japan's actions are politically motivated and have caused an unprecedented emergency for his country's export-driven economy. At the White House, Trump said Moon, quote, tells me that they have a lot of friction going on now with respect to trade, primarily with respect to trade. Japan has some things that South Korea wants, and he asked me to get involved. The president added, quote, I like both leaders. I like President Moon, and you know how I feel about Prime Minister Abe. He's a very special guy also. So if they need me, I'm there. The row comes with tech companies around the world already under pressure from a weakening global outlook, while the chip sector is particularly threatened by soft demand. Japanese and South Korean officials held hours of talks on July 12 to discuss their row without sign of a detente. That meeting came after the U.S. State Department promised to do everything we can to ease tensions between the two U.S. allies. Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus said at that time, quote, we all face shared regional challenges and priorities in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. Women have been at the forefront of the revolt, which led to Bashir's overthrow by the military on April 11. After 3 decades of iron-fisted rule, however, the battle for women's rights in Sudan is far from over. She may have spent 40 days in jail for demonstrating against President Omar al-Bashir, who has since been toppled. But activist Amani Osmani says the battle for women's rights in Sudan is far from over. Women have been at the forefront of the revolt, which led to Bashir's overthrow by the military on April 11 after 3 decades of iron-fisted rule. Osmani, who is also a lawyer, was detained on the evening of January 12 and escorted to the fridge, a grim room where interrogations are paired with extreme cold.
مشينا موقف شندي اللي هو اسمه الثلاجات. أنا ودوني الثلاجات دي مبنى طويل تقريبا زي 6 أمتار في 4 6 في 4 وبعدين فيه تلفزيون. التلفزيون فيه قناة واحدة بس، قناة السودان، ما فيه أي قناة تاني. بعد ذاك ما في حاجة.
The fridge is part of a detention center run by all-powerful National Intelligence and Security Service, or the NISS, in a building on the Blue Nile that runs through Khartoum. Dozens of activists and political opponents of Bashir's regime have passed through what NISS agents cynically referred to as the hotel. Osmani, who spent 40 days behind bars after a frigid 7 hours of questioning, said she was arrested contrary to all laws because I stand up for women in a country where they have no rights. Another activist, 21-year-old Salwa Mohammed, took part each day in protests at a camp outside the army headquarters in central Khartoum that became the epicenter of the anti-Bashir revolt. Her aim was, quote, to have the voice of women heard in a Muslim country where she cannot go out alone, study abroad, or dress the way she wants.
As a Sudanese culture, if you just say randomized study here, you will find most of the women or the girls from the secondary or the primary school, they either get married or just stay at home. In the same family, you can find that the son, supported to be educated, and they give him everything, facilitate that. But the women no, because they see that at the end we will just get married and that is the end. So we as a new graduation or new generation, we need to give a new idea for the woman, because at the end woman is a human being. He have her own family, has own views, and marriage is just part of the life.
Women's rights, like they teach us about some bad habits in Sudan, like female genital mutilation and women's rights and the early marriage. And we usually go to field trips and educate women about like breast cancer, me as a medical school, and children abuse, all this issue, and also women education.
I strongly believe that, because you can see that here in Sudan as daily life, that there's a lot of inequality that happens because the lack of confidence and education from the side of women, they get suppressed a lot. So I believe that coming to a place like this will enlighten them so they can become better and maybe challenge men a little bit.
Coming up, Iran leads the resistance against U.S. unilateralism. The U.S. endures extreme heat as temperatures soar. President Trump says we will work with the UK over Iran's seizure of a British oil tanker. Plus, Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo attend a conference on religious freedom. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News. Iran's Foreign Affairs Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said his country leads the resistance against the unilateralism exercised by the United States against the world during a meeting in Caracas.
Revertirla. Mi país, queridos amigos, lidera la resistencia de las nuevas tendencias unilaterales. Nuestros esfuerzos para abordar la preocupación acerca de nuestro programa pacífico nuclear, aunque infundado, es una de las principales víctimas del nuevo unilateralismo. La intervención grosera de Estados Unidos en los asuntos internos de Venezuela, incluyendo la instigación de un golpe de Estado fallido en abril último, es un nuevo ejemplo de la malévola acción.
The United States sweated through a weekend of dangerously hot weather, with major cities, including New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, experiencing temperatures approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Americans braced for a second and equally scorching day of dangerously hot weather Sunday. An oppressive heat wave stretching from the Midwestern plains to the Atlantic coast had nearly 150 million people struggling to stay cool amid stifling temperatures Saturday. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said on Twitter, "The temperatures we're seeing in our city today and tomorrow could be the highest we've seen in years. Take it seriously." The heat continued through late Sunday as a high-pressure system off the Atlantic coast ushered in steamy subtropical air. People were urged to stay hydrated, watch out for the sick and elderly, stay inside as much as possible, and not leave children or animals in cars. The heat wave already claimed at least 3 lives, including 2 earlier in the week in the eastern state of Maryland. In Arkansas, 32-year-old former NFL player Mitch Petrus died of a heat stroke Thursday after working outside his family's shop. Heat warnings have also been issued for parts of eastern Canada. In New York, de Blasio declared a heat emergency. The New York City Triathlon, which had been scheduled for Sunday, was canceled for the first time since its founding in 2001. Meanwhile, the 2-day OZ Fest, a food, comedy, and music festival set for Central Park, was also called off. In Washington, a popular weekly outdoor summer jazz concert at the National Gallery of Sculpture Garden was canceled. New York City opened 500 cooling centers for residents. At least 3 public defenders said on Twitter that inmates in New York's notorious Rikers Island jail complex were suffering with no air conditioning and that some guards had turned off fans as punishment, resulting in, quote, deadly conditions. The Brooklyn Defender Services Legal Aid Group said some inmates didn't have summer clothing, only long underwear provided by the group last winter. De Blasio wrote on Twitter, top officials from the city's Department of Corrections were at the facility monitoring the response to the heat wave to protect health and safety of everyone in the facility. Climate data showed June was the hottest month on record worldwide, with a heat wave across Europe smashing national records. When asked about the announcement by Iran's Revolutionary Guards that it has confiscated a British tanker in the strategic Strait of Hormuz, U.S. President Donald Trump said, quote, "We heard it was 1, we heard it was 2. We will work with the United Kingdom."
And we'll talk to the UK, and we have no written agreement, but we have an agreement. They've been a very great ally of ours. So we heard about it. We heard it was 1, we heard it was 2. And we'll be working with the UK. So we're going to be speaking with the UK. And this only goes to show what I'm saying about Iran. Trouble, nothing but trouble. It's not American ship, it's UK. I guess it could be 1, could be 2. And we'll be speaking to them. They have a new prime minister coming soon, and that's a good thing for the UK.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Thursday that the United States will create a new international body to campaign for religious freedom following a major meeting in Washington. Dubbed the International Religious Freedom Alliance, Pompeo said that details of the group were still being worked out, but that it would bring like-minded countries together to make the issue a priority.
We will create the International Religious Freedom Alliance. We hope that this new vehicle, the first ever international body devoted to this specific topic, will build on efforts to date and bring like-minded countries together to confront challenges of international religious freedom.
The 3-day gathering at the State Department, which is being held for the second straight year, is bringing together dozens of countries and hundreds of activists to promote religious freedom. Pompeo said Albania, Colombia, Morocco, and the Vatican were planning events to follow up on the Washington ministerial. After the first year's edition, Britain, Taiwan, and the United Arab Emirates organized related conferences. Pompeo, in his remarks, harshly criticized U.S. adversaries Iran and China for their human rights records, calling Beijing's incarceration of more than 1 million Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim Turkic-speaking people, quote, truly the stain of the century. Uyghur activists say that China has sought to indoctrinate peaceful Muslims, forcing them to eat pork, among other actions that are sinful in Islam. China described the camps as vocational training and says it is trying to root out extremism. Religious freedom has been one of the few human rights causes that have energized President Donald Trump's administration, which counts on support from an evangelical Christian base. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I am Melissa Gonzalez Manglikmot, always one with 25.